Hey guys, so in today's video we'll actually be going over the self-healing process, and at the foundation of the self-healing process is healing your inner child. Now I know we're hearing a lot in mainstream psychology about the inner child, but what they're often referring to is actually healing the inner wounded child that still exists within us, okay? Now in today's video what I really essentially want to do is I want to go over what is this inner wounded child that exists within us, how to recognize it when it comes out, and lastly, how we're actually going to heal this wounded inner child that still exists. So first, it's important for us to even distinguish what this wounded inner child even is. No, there is not actually a toddler sitting inside of you. But essentially what has gone on is we all have aspects of our consciousness or our psyche that did not evolve with the rest of us. And this is largely due to points in your childhood where you were not able to process really difficult emotions, feelings, or emotional pain at the time. So these things essentially get stuck in time. There are parts of our psyche that never age with us. And then we go on and create walls and defense mechanisms because we were told that it was unsafe to feel these feelings or feel this pain in childhood. And so it's this unconscious process of holding on to these pieces, not allowing them to grow with us, and creating basically a barrier around us from ever having to come into contact with them. There's a problem with that. The problem is that now these walls, these defense mechanisms, they're not our true selves. They're not our real personality. And we will spend all this time protecting these aspects that we perceive as ourselves that are really just protecting pain and maybe, difficult emotions that we actually are able to feel now. So that's what we're referring to as the inner wounded child. It's not this part of your conscience or psyche that you need to caress like a baby. It's actually parts of your pain that you need to go in and allow yourself to feel. And the more you resist it, the more difficult it becomes. So the second part, how do we begin to recognize when our wounded inner child is beginning to come out? Because remember, we are constantly strategizing ways to hide ourselves from what is essentially the pain of this inner child. So how do children behave? Children experience the world in extremes, meaning that they really can't contextualize a gray area in situations. Everything's either good or bad, right or wrong. Children are what we would consider to be very egocentric, okay? They can't really perceive anything outside of themselves in a lot of situations. So if they ever make a mistake, they're either going to completely internalize or externalize the situation. They're going to feel a lot of shame or guilt, like it's all on them without any context of why that mistake may have happened, or they'll completely externalize it. They'll completely shift the blame on someone else and not accept any responsibility for the action. So when you suddenly see yourself shifting into a state where you're in a tumultuous state of shame and guilt and saying you're bad or creating so many negative self-judgments without even trying to step back and contextualize the situation, understand the mistake, look at the other aspects of it, just purely looking at it from a black or white aspect of you're bad and there's no good in you, or if you completely shift blame on, let's say, your partner, it's all their fault, you have no responsibility, this is the wounded inner child. You are experiencing that egocentric aspect of yourself that never was allowed to age with the rest of you. Now, why does this part come out? Because you're being triggered. Something in your external environment is triggering you back to the pain that you're trying to hide yourself from. Your walls have been broken through, okay? And this can happen in so many different things. It can happen if you have a fear of abandonment. Anytime you sense that someone may be leaving you, even if it's nowhere near that extreme, your inner child becomes to come out. It begins to feel abandoned. It wants to protect itself from its pain, so it could disassociate. This is when the wounded inner child comes out. When we are getting triggered back, you are essentially going back in time. You are experiencing the past in the present. So the third part, the most important part, how do we heal this inner child? Well, healing the inner child requires us to surrender to essentially the unknown, the helplessness and the powerlessness that we felt as a child and that we've now spent our entire lives defending ourselves from ever having to feel into. Now, healing the inner child is just a multifaceted process because it requires you to go into all the moments and events in your life where you weren't able to feel or process the emotion and pain in that specific moment and have spent all these years building walls and defense mechanisms around, okay? So the first step is to witness those moments where you begin to become triggered back into that wounded inner child state. And that will likely involve when you start seeing yourself going into a fight or flight response, when you start seeing yourself shifting blame to another person or thing completely, or saying the thing is completely your fault and you're powerless in the situation, all right? So then the second step in this would be to accept full responsibility. Gather yourself, deep breathe, and say that you are in full control. As a child, you didn't feel in control. Children don't feel safe. They need other sources to provide them that attachment and that safety. But you're not a child anymore. So you have to collect yourself, witness yourself going into the state, and get out of the past and bring yourself into the present moment. The third step is we now have to disengage from the moment or thing that is triggering us back into this wounded inner child state. So if it's an argument or a fight with a partner, politely let them know that you are being triggered from something in your childhood. You may act irrationally or unfairly if you were going to continue to engage with them in this argument, and separate from it, okay? Go somewhere else where you have space to just collect yourself. And now that leads us to our fourth step, and this is the hardest one, okay? This is the one where you have to kind of tear down the walls, bring them down, get rid of the resistance, and surrender into the pain that you spent your entire life trying to hide from, okay? Now surrendering, it sounds easy, to some it may sound hard. It's a skill that actually takes time. It takes practice to learn how to surrender into the uncomfortable emotions, into the uncomfortable feelings. Remember, you're not surrendering into blame or shame. You're not surrendering into immense amounts of guilt. You're surrendering into the powerlessness and the helplessness you felt as a child. Those moments where you weren't able to feel the emotions or pain that you should have been allowed to feel. You have to come in and feel those things. You have to finally let them flow through you, okay? And you can't judge it. You can't find yourself getting in these constant negative self-judgments or criticizing it. You just have to allow it to come up and allow yourself to kind of step back and let it flow from within you. And that leads us to our final step, which is reparenting. How do we reparent? We become the healthy adult that we didn't have in that moment. Now that doesn't mean that you didn't have good support systems or healthy parents. It just meant in that moment you weren't given what you needed. So now you have to do that. Now you have to cultivate essentially that healthy, positive adult ego that you weren't shown in that specific moment. So what does that look like? It's often someone who's considerate of another's feelings, all right? It's someone that doesn't criticize you for your mistakes. It's someone that allows you to learn from trial and error, to make mistakes, who holds you accountable and responsible, but still has a gentle kindness about it too, all right? It's basically a healthy adult ego is a part of you that is going to hold space for this unevolved aspect of your consciousness to come through and learn, to come through and experience what it needs to experience, and to have that healthy nurture from you, not that negative self-talk, but that healthy nurturing that allows you to come into yourself and allows you to grow and learn from the experience instead of hiding from it. The last thing that a positive, healthy adult ego would have in this whole reparenting process is being responsive to your personal needs. Oftentimes, as children or even as adults, we neglect self-care. We neglect our needs. Sometimes we're not even aware of what our personal needs are. Reparenting this part of you that was hurt and never allowed to process its feelings requires it to now meet its needs, requires you to now give it what it was not able to be given, all right? So you need to figure out what that is and then allow yourself to take care of yourself, to not neglect yourself. And slowly and piece by piece, you will begin to heal these parts of yourself, and you will find yourself not engaging in these behaviors that you don't want to engage in. Alright, so that's it for today's video. Obviously, this was a very generalized, broad overview of the healing the inner child process. If you want me to go more in depth into some of the aspects of healing the wounded inner child, please let me know down below in the comment section. Also, once again, please subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to making new videos. And let me know any thoughts or comments you may have on this video, or anything else that you may want me to know. Alright, great.